Before we begin on these stories, I want to mention that there are several highly disturbing and graphic stories in this video. I recommend you check the timestamps in the pinned comment, as I will have the most disturbing stories labeled just in case you want to skip any of them. Without further ado, let's proceed. Trucker here. I think the best creepy thing that ever happened to me was I was heading from Tucson, Arizona up into Salt Lake City, Utah. Well, this was a few years ago and the main highway had been taken out in a flash flood, was under construction, so I had to take a weird detour through the mountains in lower Utah. Well, it was getting late and I was getting tired, so I pulled off into the shoulder and went to sleep in my bunk. Now, this was in the middle of nowhere. The closest town was like 40 miles away. So it is completely pitch black outside once I turn the lights off. Anyway, around 4 a.m. I wake up because I'm hearing something messing with my truck, like playing with the air and power cables between my cab and the trailer, which is literally 6 inches from where my head is at, but on the outside of the cab. Then I feel something climb onto the landing that's on the back of my truck and it shakes my whole truck. So I'm guessing something around 200 to 300 pounds was climbing around back there. I'm thinking like a mountain lion or a bear. At this point, I'm wide the hell awake and I want to get this thing away from me. So I slam my hand into my cab wall trying to scare whatever is out there, slam hard enough to really make it loud. I then hear someone, a male, scream bloody murder, and I hear them fall off the back of my truck. I then hear about 15 other people all around my truck yelling. I climb up front, turn on my lights, and illuminate a squad of Army reserves doing their midnight ruck march and capture drills. Turns out these guys were supposed to find an abandoned truck and secure it for their midnight drills. That truck was 3 miles back down the road. They were not expecting me to be sleeping there and thought I was part of the drill. I'm ex-military, so after explaining I was not part of their test and legit was just out there out of coincidence, we all just laughed it off. They had to radio to their CO and tell him I was there and to not have other squads bother me. This happened when I was 15. My dad ran a wrecker service for over-the-road truckers. Late one night, we got a call that a truck had run off the road and struck a tree 20 miles south of town, so my dad and I fired up the wrecker and headed south. When we came on the scene, the truck and trailer had ran off the road to the right and smacked a tree head on. It was one of those 100-year-old oak trees. This was back in the day when there were cab over semi-trucks, or the ones without noses or the engine is under the cab. The truck was still running at idle. The door was closed, but no driver was seen from the driver's window. The front driver's windshield was busted and there was a large hole in the middle. The trailer was loaded with flat 1/4 sheet steel. Of course, it is pitch dark, and you can't really see things that well when we first got there. Our impression was the driver smacked a tree, hit his head on the windshield, and was already getting treatment somewhere. So my dad set up the wrecker to hook onto the trailer, and he wanted me to open the cab in order to release the brakes. When I opened the door, I was greeted with the lower half of a body. When the driver hit the tree, a single sheet of steel broke free and cut through the cab, cutting the driver right in half. The upper half of his body went through the windshield. I found the driver's upper half in a cornfield about 40 feet from the truck, and he was still grabbing the upper part of the steering wheel. It looked like he was frozen in time, still driving the truck. Needless to say, he went in a body bag with his lower half, and we worked through that night getting the truck and trailer back to town. This is one of my many experiences I had growing up in a wrecker service family. My father was a truck driver in East Africa in the 80s and early 90s. During the years leading up to the Rwandan genocide, my father was passing through Rwanda. He reached a checkpoint, and he was forcibly removed from his truck at gunpoint. Apparently, he looked like he belonged to a Tutsi tribe, and they put him in a cage with other Tutsi prisoners. He tried communicating that he isn't Rwandan, but no one spoke the same language as him. Every night, they would take about 5 people from the cage and slaughter them in front of him. After the third night, he saw a man that spoke a little bit of Swahili, which my dad spoke, and he told him that he's not Rwandan and then showed him his ID. Somehow, that guy got him out and he was handed the keys to his truck and he was on his way. dad drove a truck between Edinburgh and London, and he tells this story often. He was driving down the motorway and looked to his right, and he saw a woman with a Miss Trunchbull bun staring at him with a terrified expression from a car next to him. Before he really knows how to react, the car pulls off at the next exit, and my dad, although shaken, carries on. About an hour later, a different car with a different driver pulls alongside my dad with the same woman in the passenger seat, with the same expression on her face. My dad then thinks to himself, "Fuck this," and plans to pull into the next services to report, as even if it's nothing or a misunderstanding, it's better safe than sorry, right? Anyway, the car disappears before he can get any details, plates, etc., and he thinks there's no point calling the police with no details, so he just carries on driving. Literally about 4 hours later, almost in London, yet another car pulls alongside him with the same woman, same Miss Trunchbull hair, same terrified expression. Except this time she appears to be screaming at my dad through the window. So my dad pulls over into a lay-by and calls the police. Apparently they have received 3 other calls about that same woman and car in the same area in the last few minutes. It is unfortunately anticlimactic, as he never heard anything more about it, but he didn't see her again, and although he kept an eye on the news, he didn't see anything about it. Hopefully it's just a giant coincidence. Who knows? Around 2006-ish, I was driving flatbed, picked up a load of construction material. Drywall, roofing, don't remember, but it was pre-packaged in boxes, and I remember having to use strap protectors on the load. This was in rural Tennessee. My memory is foggy now, but I want to say it was between Memphis and Nashville, but closer to the intersection of the Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee state lines. Tarp required, so I strapped everything down, tarped the load, and left the shipper. About 5 miles down the road in the middle of nowhere woods on a 2-lane road, I noticed my tarp flapping in the wind. Found a wide shoulder and pulled over to fix it. I realized that I just flat did a shitty job tarping this load, and decided to redo it on the side of the road. Undo all the bungee straps, drag the tarps off, roll them back up, climb up the load, and start unrolling the tarps again. And I see a guy walking down the same side of the road I'm on, coming towards my truck. I don't think anything about it other than to keep an eye on him because I'm in the middle of nowhere and continue what I'm doing. About the time I have the tarp set in place and I'm climbing down to start hooking the bungee straps back on, this dude is getting close enough that I'm now paying more attention to him than I am to tarping my load. I grab my winch bar and set it on the trailer where I'm working just in case. It's an 8-pound solid metal bar that's about 4 feet long, tapered to a blunt point on one and hollow on the other. It's used for tightening straps and chains, etc. The guy gets to me and the first thing I notice is his hair. It's like a mullet, but it's patchy as hell. Like he tried to cut his own hair and had a seizure in the process and just said, "Screw it, good enough to party." The next thing I noticed were his eyes, which I can only describe as off. Like they were clear. I didn't think he was drunk or high or anything, but it also gave me the distinct impression that the elevator didn't go all the way up. Clothes were dirty and not well maintained, with white dirty tennis shoes, because I remember he didn't have laces on one shoe and the tongue was noticeably out of place. He stops by me, waits until I acknowledge him, and then just says, "I've got a long walk." I'm like, "Yeah man, you do. We're in the middle of nowhere," making it clear there's no ride to be had here. He nods, start walking by me, continuing on his way, stops at about the driver door on my truck, turns around, comes back to me, and then repeats himself. "I've got a long walk." At this point, I explained to him that I can't give him a ride, insurance and all that. I apologize for not being able to help him out, and he seems to accept this, turns around, and leaves. I wait for him to get a little ways away from my truck and start working on finishing the tarp job. I still keep an eye on him and he's moving away from me. As I'm putting on the last of the bungee straps, I look over to check where he's at, and he's turned around heading back towards me, now about 100 yards in front of my truck and coming back my way. It looks like he's talking on a cell phone. He has his hand up to his face and I can barely make out his mouth moving, his other hand waving like he's having a conversation with someone. I finish with the straps, grab my winch bar, and am climbing back into my truck as he's about 10 yards away now. As soon as I get in the cab, I lock the doors and set the winch bar on the passenger seat just in case. I look at the guy and I realize he's not talking on a phone. He's talking to his fucking hand. And now I'm nervous because he doesn't look like he's having a nice pleasant chat. It looks more like an angry conversation. I crank up the truck, put it in gear, and just pull out. Didn't look for traffic or anything. As I pass him, he's just looking at me, still holding his hand to his face with this dead-ass look on his face, just staring at me. It gave me the creeps. About the time I hit the 5th or 6th gear, I look in the mirror, and no one's there. I was driving through eastern Washington on some state roads. There were no rest stops or cities, but I had done the route enough to know that there were these massive dirt areas every 40 miles where you could park safely away from the road. I decided to call it a night and close my blinds and laid down to watch something on my phone. After roughly an hour, I hear someone try to open the driver's side door. I haven't heard of any vehicles on the road the whole time I'm parked, but I get up to peek out the curtains. As I'm looking out into the blackness of the driver's side window, I hear them try the passenger side door. I peek down from the top of the curtains but can't see anything, so I start the truck and kick on the lights. I'm fairly freaked out at this point, so I'm still not opening the curtains but peeking through gaps. Nothing. I take a deep breath and close the sleeper curtains too, because for some reason that's going to make things better, right? After laying back down and convincing myself that something blew against the truck and it only sounded like the doors, it was fairly windy outside and a lot of flat ground. Well, I hear what sounds like someone trying to open the vents on the sleeper. The door handles start clicking again and the truck starts shifting like someone's climbing on it. I hit the alarm button in the sleeper hoping to spook them off, but it does nothing but add to the noise of the door handles, fingers tapping on the window and chassis, and the hiss of air coming out of the suspension. Then it just suddenly stops. A few moments where I can only hear myself breathing and my heart pounding before I hear another truck approach and then drive by. I spent the next few hours waiting for whatever it was to come back, but it never did. In the morning, I couldn't find any footprints or damage to my truck, but on every window were tiny human-looking handprints, like a toddler had licked their hand and then stuck it onto my window over and over. It's really bizarre. Many years ago, I was on what is called a meet and turn. This is where a driver that is domiciled out of one city will drive a load halfway to its destination, while a driver domiciled out of that destination will drive halfway with a load that is destined for my city. We meet in the parking lot, switch trailers, and drive back home. I had been on this run for a few months and found that I always got to the meet point about an hour before the other driver. It was a dark and empty dirt lot at about 3 a.m., so I would stretch out across the seat and take a short nap. One night, about 10 minutes into my nap, I was awoken by a barking dog. I tried to ignore it, but it carried on for several minutes and got louder as the dog got closer. Soon it became apparent that the dog was right outside of my truck barking at me. Okay, either this dog is Lassie and is trying to alert me to something, or else he's just a pain in the ass and I'll need to throw something at him to scare him off. It is important to note that the barking had been going on for a good 10 minutes at this point, so I sat up and looked out my window. Standing there mere inches on the other side of the glass was a man of about 35. He was a large fellow and he was barking at me. His eyes were crazy and he was frothing at the mouth a little. The scene really held my full attention for a moment. The sheer creepiness of this struck me. Gently and making an absolute minimum of sudden movements, I reached down and started my truck and slowly pulled away. He chased me much like you would expect an angry dog to do, barking all the while. Needless to say, it played hell with my power naps from then on. My dad was in Albuquerque, stopped for the night in a pawn shop parking lot. It was about 10:30 p.m. and his air compressor was empty. Earlier that night he had rolled down the windows, but since the compressor was out, he couldn't roll them back up until it refilled. Anyway, He's getting ready for bed and a voice yells at him not to move. A female Puerto Rican tweaker jumped into the truck from the driver's side. The voice was in the passenger side window. She pressed a gun to his head, ordering him to give her all of his money and belongings of value. Unfortunately for her, my dad doesn't ever have cash on him, and the poor guy never buys himself anything expensive. He only had $60, a broken laptop, a cup of change, and his clothes, blankets, and toiletries. Of course, he did have his debit card, credit card, and a T-check. Checks they can redeem at stops for the load they're hauling, for those who don't know. They held him hostage in there for more than an hour as she unloaded everything from the cab and then handed it to her 300-pound male friends. According to my dad, homegirl was tripping balls the entire time. She ordered him to follow her to the ATM, but considering that my dad owns his own business, it probably wouldn't have ended well had she seen his accounts. He decided he couldn't let that happen. After a few more minutes, she decided they were walking to the ATM. She had her friend on the passenger side help her down, ordering my dad to follow. As soon as she was clear of the door, he closed the door, locked it, and tried to honk the horn, but it barely made hardly any audible noise. Apparently, this was enough to send the trio running into the darkness with blankets in hand. Shaken, my dad called the police. Surprisingly, they had an amazing response. 15 to 20 patrol cars, a helicopter, dogs, etc. were all there within 5 minutes. They caught 2 of them, but not the third one. I would also like to add a second story and figure why not put it here. My dad drives in Texas a lot as well, but there's a particular road he always avoids. I'm not really sure what road it is, but he says it's in the middle of old Native American land. One night as he was driving through, he kept seeing shadows running alongside his trailer. Every once in a while, he would hear a loud bang as if someone was slapping the side of the trailer. He decided to stop and see if a tire had blown, because that's the only thing that could be making that noise. He did his usual walk around, checking the tires, but as he turned the corner, he heard a laugh, and then a shadow took off running down the road. Needless to say, he shit his pants, jumped in the truck, and didn't stop until daylight. I actually just got off the phone with my dad. He said this incident with the skinwalker was between Fort Stockton, Texas and Eagle Pass, Texas. Apparently, he saw the skinwalker standing on the side of the road with his arms crossed about 15 miles later. My brother-in-law was a truck driver. A Toyota Corolla driven by a man with suicidal tendencies pulled into his lane, and within seconds he hucked that car and killed the dude. There was no way to avoid it. My brother-in-law got out of his rig because his load was gasoline and saw the little car starting to be engulfed in flames, and he also saw a decapitated man inside. After he called 911, he was taken to the hospital for minor injuries. He called my sister, who I was with at the time, to try and get his things from the rig the police were able to get. My sister and I got there, and all that was left was the trunk and back axle of the car. The rig was burnt, but that car was almost completely gone. My brother-in-law has never been the same person since, and I'm scared shitless whenever I'm around a big rig on the road. I've seen some rather screwed up stuff over the years. From bad wrecks, drug addicts, panhandlers, and more. There used to be a small rest area in North Dakota on US 52 at the intersection of ND 30 near Sikeston. I came out of the building after using the facilities and got ready to leave. As I was starting to pull out, a guy opened his car door. The angle was just right to see that he was buck naked. Then he gets out of his car and starts walking around his car. I'm not really sure if he was a druggie or just thought, this is a good way to pick up a truck driver I've never met before. I just drove away and didn't look back. Maybe that isn't the same level of creepiness you're all expecting, but I thought it was. One story that was rather creepy to me though was that I was driving across Kansas on I-70 headed west. There's a pretty long stretch out there that's just a couple of little towns and not much else. As the night wore on, I realized that I had been passed several times by this beat-up old motorhome. Several people sat with their noses almost pressed to the window, watching me with creepy interest as they passed. And this happened every time, and I never noticed where I repassed them at. A couple of times, I swear they passed me twice where there was no rest areas or exits to pull off at. I would have seen them stop somewhere, but yet, here they were passing me again. They all looked like some variant of Charles Manson or some other freaky type. Had me pretty uptight by the time I got to the TA truck stop in Lyman and stopped for the night. Almost every driver I know has seen this stuff late at night that just can't be explained. Maybe it's fatigue, or maybe not. But I've seen very large man-like shadows cross the road way too fast for their size several times. I ain't saying it's Bigfoot. Never got a clear view. Was always at the end of the headlights where I couldn't be entirely sure I even seen anything. But it sure looked like a large something crossing a whole road in just a couple of steps. Really weird. This happened to my dad, and he isn't a trucker, but it's still a trucking story. My dad was working for Pillsbury Foods, which had recently bought another company that was starting to do business in fresh vegetables rather than canned. I think it was Green Giant. Anyways, the fresh vegetables were sometimes shipped in from Mexico in refrigerated trucks. Unfortunately, Pillsbury kept getting shipments of broccoli or green beans, etc. that were spoiled. They suspected that the Mexican truckers were turning off the refrigeration units in their trucks in order to save gasoline. The company decided to send people down to Mexico to ride with the truckers just to make sure they didn't turn off their fridges. My dad was one of those people. So, cut to a road in the Mexican desert, and my dad is riding along with a Mexican truck driver who speaks approximately 0 words of English. It is apparently getting dark out, and the driver tries to turn his headlights on, but they don't go on. My dad tries to ask the driver if they're going to stop and try to fix the lights or something, but the guy just says something in Spanish and keeps driving. Not too much later, and it's starting to get really dark, and the driver's only going about 30 miles an hour. In the dark, with absolutely no lights. My dad is getting pretty scared at this point. Finally, a small car drives up behind them and passes. The driver then says, "Aha!" and starts to speed up and tailgates this little sedan. He's trying to use the lights of the little car ahead of them so he can go faster. Now, imagine being this poor guy who passes a giant dark truck on a dark road. Then the truck starts following right behind you. When you slow down to 30, it slows down to 30. When you speed up to 90, it stays right on your tail. Fucking terrifying. So in the cab, my dad is getting really nervous. Finally, the little car they're following around just swerves off the road and drives into the desert. The guy probably thought this ghost truck was going to be his death. The trucker just swears in Spanish and slows way down. After a few more minutes, he just looks at my dad and goes, "Aha!" He comes to a stop, digs around in the back for a minute, and pops back out with a huge Bowie knife. He holds it in front of my dad and says again, "Aha!" Now my dad thinks he's going to die on a dark road at the hands of some crazy Mexican trucker. The trucker just uses the knife though to pry open something on the dash where the switch for the lights are. Then he goes outside and fiddles around. After a few minutes, he comes back in, messes with some wires, and the lights go on. Then he just starts driving. All while my dad just sits terrified for several more hours until they finally arrive. Well, I'm not a trucker, but I have a creepy story about a tow truck driver who took me home over a 3-hour ride. I was heading from Dayton, Ohio to a show in Cleveland. About 30 minutes from my destination, my car breaks down. At the time, I was only 16 years old, so I was still pretty reliant on my parents, and I knew nothing about cars. So I called on my dad and had him arrange the details to get someone to come out for me in my car. After about an hour of waiting, the truck pulls up, and I finally feel relieved I'll be able to head home after all this stress, not even so much bummed out about the show. I really should not have felt relieved. At first, I thought he was nothing more than an average neckbeard, until the ride home. To start things off, as soon as I got into his truck, he asked me why I was out here all alone and if anybody was going to look for me. I quickly realized how weird of a question that was, but proceeded to answer it to just relieve the tension. It was around 7 p.m. when he picked me up, and on the way back about 30 minutes in, he asked if I wanted to get something to eat from McDonald's. I said yes. As I'm in line at McDonald's getting my food, I can feel his eyes on me, just staring at me from behind. I then turn and glance over my shoulder, and I notice him looking at me and blatantly licking his lips. I'm a dude, by the way. At this point, I had no idea what to do. I got my food and returned to the truck and tried to keep to myself. I just wanted the ride to be over with. After sitting there in silence for a while, I hear the strangest sentence someone has ever said to me. "If you sit there and act like a deer, I'm gonna gut you like one." Of course, I'm feeling defenseless and I just make an awkward chuckle. But then he pulls out this decent-sized pocket knife and is just holding it up by the steering wheel. Not threatening me with it, but he was almost admiring it. To break the silence, since I didn't want to be gutted, I asked him if he had any good stories about some of his pickups and drives back. He gives me some story about some girl he took back and said something about her walls of her room was blue. This was good to hear because I figured he wouldn't want to rape me or anything. A bit later, he pulled out his shitty flip phone and asked if I wanted to see something funny, and I said sure. He told me to scoot closer to the middle of the seat, and out of pure stupidity, I did. The first thing he did when I scooted over was throw his arm over my shoulder faster than I could process what happened. He said that it was hard to show me the videos on his phone and drive, so it was easier. The first video he showed me was of some Mexican man or something sitting at a police station looking like he was waiting to be processed in. The man took a sip of a flask out of his jacket, then he pulled out a gun and shot himself in the head. It was so fucked up. I told him that was messed up and not funny at all. He let out the most manic laughter I have ever heard. I tried to scoot back, but he had a stiff arm to the side of me that I could tell was not going to move. He told me that he had even better videos. The next one was of a girl being fucked by a horse, and apparently it killed her as she fell to the ground flat on her face. He told me that his brother took that video. The last video was a video of a vagina. It looked pretty normal at first, until the girl reached her hand into her vagina and took out a huge fish. Literally reached in and took out a bass or catfish or something. It was a big one. Yeah, this shit was really disturbing. After we neared the town I lived in, he asked me where my apartment was, not knowing how old I was. I said I would be at my dad's house, and he immediately stopped the truck and just said, "Just when I thought this was going to be fun." He pulled over on the side of the road and let my car down about 10 minutes before home. He then got back in and told me this is as far as he can go, and he'll see me again soon. I looked at him puzzled. I didn't pay him and didn't see how he couldn't drive more than 10 minutes, but I didn't care. I got out and he pulled off. My phone was dead, so I proceeded to just walk the rest of the way and make it home. As soon as I walked in, my dad asked me where I had been and who brought me home. I told him the story about the creepy truck driver and how I felt terrified. He then told me that the tow truck service he had called had notified him that I wasn't there when they sent out a driver. So yeah, turns out it was just some random guy with a truck and not from the company that was supposed to take me home. I'm not a trucker, but this is a story about a creepy trucker I encountered. I was a hitchhiker one summer, and I decided to hitchhike from Quebec City to Achaern, Ontario, then down to North Bay. This happened in 1999, and I was 18 and a big kid, but still very much a kid. I hadn't had a lot of luck this night, so I was walking around midnight down the highway when a truck pulled over and picked me up. But he was not Canadian and was from somewhere in the US. This guy starts rambling, finally having an audience. He just goes on and on about how people who have wronged him and pissed him off. Then he talks about having shot a guy once. Some guy who was harassing his mother made him so mad and he shot him up. Not dead, just wounded. I'm just the audience to this, and it was his time to shine. Then he goes on about how much he loves his children. He alternates between speaking of them warmly and lovingly and speaking about how angry he'd be if anyone ever messed with them. Then, without taking his hands off the wheel and still driving, he turns his head to me, locks eye contact, and says, "I'll fucking kill anyone who messes with my kids," and then just holds the steer with me. Again, I'm 18. I'm a kid myself. He felt very much like he was threatening my life, even though we're like 1,500 kilometers away from his kids in the middle of literally nowhere. I didn't know how he was doing it, driving just fine while not looking at the road at all all to make some point to me that was very important for me to hear. I began to get really nervous about all of this. I asked him to pull over and let me out. Whatever the night held for me was going to be way less scary than this madman. Anyways, that's the story. It ends with me trying and failing to catch some shut-eye in a ditch before a grandfatherly trucker from South Carolina pulled over and begged me to ride with him so I wouldn't freeze. I could barely understand this guy, his southern accent was so thick in his speech, but man oh man was he nice and kind, full of stories of pride for his grandchildren. He took me all the way to North Bay. I'm a long-haul trucker. I see and deal with a lot of weird and scary stuff. I was traveling up US 93 in Nevada heading to Portland, Oregon for a delivery. It was around 1:30 in the morning and I needed to stop and log my half-hour break. I found a wide spot and pulled off. Did my logs and made myself a sandwich. While I was eating said sandwich, I noticed a vehicle pulling behind me. I didn't get too concerned about it, but kept one eye on it while I ate. Then it got strange. I noticed a figure in the headlight of the vehicle approach the back driver's side of my trailer, stop, and then look like he or she was rubbing the back side of my trailer with his or her hand. Suspicious, I got my pistol out of my log box back in my sleeper, cocked and locked it, slid it behind my waistband, and proceeded to climb out of my rig. I walked about 10 feet back, kept my hand on the butt of my pistol, and flicked my flashlight on and aimed it at the person. It was a man. A weird-looking fellow in a dirty whitish trench coat, long straggly hair, and bald on top. He was rubbing something on the side of my trailer. I hollered at him to stop what he was doing. He looked up at me, smirked, and without turning his gaze off of me, starts walking towards me. I backed my way to my door, keeping my hand on my pistol, but not pulling it out. I didn't feel like my life was in danger at that time. I opened my door, climbed into my rig, shut the door, and locked it. The dude walks up by my door and looks at me, still smirking. I'm thinking, what the hell? This dude is totally off his rockers. I'm thinking my half-hour break is over, and it's time to go. However, while I'm looking down at him and getting ready to turn the key, I feel my truck rock. I jump and look in my driver's side mirror. Nothing. I look over to check my passenger side mirror, and there on my step, face pressed to my passenger side window, is a freaky perfect replica of an old witch smiling, rotten teeth, cocking her head left then right, fogging up my window. Needless to say, I about sucked my seat up my ass, but that's not even the end of it. Oh no, the dude then jumps on my driver's side step and proceeds to start licking my window. Then the witch lady starts smacking my window with the palm of her hand over and over. The dude starts telling me to open up. Hey boy, open up. Come on now, open up. We're friendly. What you got in this trailer of yours? Anything good? Open up, boy. Now I feel threatened. I pull out my pistol. The chick immediately disappears off my passenger side step. The dude laughs, jumps up and down on my step, then grins, touches his finger to his nose, then jumps off my step. I fired my truck up and took the hell off. Never did see any headlights following me, thank God. They were some really disturbing travelers. Being a young woman in a nearly exclusively male-dominant industry, I have plenty of stories about creepers that I've encountered over the years. This particular story about this one particular creep is likely the worst yet. At the time, I was working for a steel pipe processing plant as a receiver. Trucks with 40-foot long pipe would come in, and it was my job to offload them with a giant forklift. First, though, I had to collect the BOL from the driver. BOL stands for Bill of Lading. It's a shipping document that has information about what's on the load, where it's going, where it's from, you get the point. So I would retrieve the BOL from the trucker and I would compare the sheet to the cargo and sign off on it if everything checks out. I would see a lot of the same drivers on a regular basis. I got a lot of joking comments about how I looked too young to be driving a machine that size. A few of them asked me out, but I'm married and most of the guys actually respected that. So when I encountered a new driver from one of the trucking companies, it really didn't surprise me when one of the very first, if not the first thing he said to me was, "Hey, how old are you?" 23, I replied with a half-hearted chuckle. "Are you married?" "I'm engaged, so pretty much," I replied, starting to get reasonably uneasy about this guy. Not wanting to make small talk or answer any more increasingly personal questions from this guy I just met, I asked him for the BOL. "Anything for you, sexy girl." Excuse me? What did you just call me?" "It's really sexy to see a girl like you driving a big truck." Now, I'm a bit of a hothead. I need to stand up for myself in situations like this, or else I risk becoming a welcome mat for this kind of attention. He hands me the paperwork with a trademark creepy grin, like he was getting off on the fact that I was within grabbing distance for him. "Listen, old man," as I snatch the paperwork out of his hand. "I do not come to work to be spoken to like that. I'm here for a paycheck, not a date." "What? It was just a compliment. Don't be like that, sexy girl. Don't fucking call me or say anything to me that you wouldn't say to any of my male coworkers. I have a fucking name, and it's not fucking smart to talk to anyone like that before you even know what it is." "I bet it's bitch," he says. I signed off on his shit, dropped his copy in the mud, and went over to the other driver waiting in line, took his paperwork, and made Creeper wait about 30 minutes, offloading 2 other trucks before I got to his. We have a safety rule that the driver must be inside the truck while it's being offloaded. So I took this opportunity to be a bigger bitch, laid on the horn of my truck, and angrily yelled at him to get in your fucking truck. After I offloaded him, I went to my supervisor and told him what happened. Not a formal complaint, but to make him aware of everything that transpired and to let him know that the driver might end up complaining to his superiors about how long it took me to see him. My supervisor sided with me. He knows that if I lost my shit on someone, they deserved it. He knew about a few other incidents prior, so he was supportive. He told me to report anything else the guy does that's fucked up, and he said he'd be willing to send someone else over to deal with that particular driver, if and when he brought another load. Later on that day, he made a funny comment about how sexy I looked in my uniform. Oversized overalls, grease-stained hoodie, boots, and hard hat. I didn't wear makeup or perfume to work. I looked like and was actually mistaken for one of the guys on a few occasions. So the creeper must have been thinking, "Oh my god, a girl. Must say nasty shit." Anyway, I thought I made things pretty clear to the creeper and thought that he wasn't going to bother me anymore. Nevertheless, I wasn't really keen on the idea of having to walk up to his cab to get paperwork from him again. The next day, guess who shows up with a new load? I call over the radio. "My favorite driver is here. Can someone grab his paperwork?" A couple of minutes go by and one of the coworkers I get along with well drives up in his smaller tow motor to approach the driver for his BOL. I wait off to the side and take this opportunity to have a smoke next to my machine while I wait for my coworker to come back with the paperwork. He comes back, and of course he wants the scoop on everything that happened the day before. I guess the driver asked why I wasn't there to collect the BOL. Coworker told him I was busy. Meanwhile, I was just having a smoke in clear view. In no hurry to offload the asshole, I told my coworker what transpired, when suddenly my coworker interrupted me. Don't look, but I think he's taking pictures of you." Of course, my head whipped around, and sure enough, Buddy was holding up his phone, pointing it at me and taking pictures, I assume. I scurried up into my machine and got on the radio for my supervisor. "Yeah, so favorite driver is taking pictures of me. 10-4, I'll call security. Do not offload him." Given the nature of what we do and why we do it, there's very strict security guidelines at this place. Once a month, we had bomb sniffer dogs inspect the property. It was that big of a deal. So even if he wasn't taking pictures of me, he had no business taking pictures on the property. Security shows up and I watch as the driver hands him his phone. My coworker was there with him and later told me that the guy said he was just trying out his new phone. Bullshit, but whatever. They didn't find any photos of me or the property on his phone, but he had a few minutes to delete them. Either way, he was barred from the property and my supervisor reported him and what had happened the day before to the driver's employer. I never saw him again, but the story doesn't end there. A few weeks later, another driver from that same company, Nice guy that I had good rapport with filled me in on my favorite driver. Your buddy got canned, eh? Oh, that's too bad. Gonna miss him. Yeah, he was on thin ice because the girls in the office were getting weird vibes from him. Always hanging around the offices way more than necessary. Nothing really to fire him over though, but his police check came in. Turns out he has prior sexual assaults on his record. Oh, how lovely.